Hello, we are live. We are unmuted on another episode of The Dungeon. I'm Harlan Kelly,
And I'm Andrew Orvidal.
and this is The Dungeon, where we interview people who play and run different TTRPGs and create. And today, our guest here is Rob from Bipolar Productions. You are a Spelljammer DM and just a cool guy. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for being on The Dungeon with us.
Totally.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Second UK guest in a row. Crazy. This is a crazy streak for us.
We're getting everywhere now. You can't get away from us.
I love it. As I think you're actually familiar with the show, which also could be a first for the dungeon, but
That's unfair.
But
two of the people now like work on the show, Josh and Jason.
That's
okay,
true.
Come
that's
on.
True. Okay,
Yeah,
it's not fair. It's not fair.
Yeah.
But one question we'd like to ask just to kick things off is, how did you get started in tabletop role-playing games?
I've been thinking about this question all day because I know it's the starter. Generally, when I'm asked this, I always go on a long tangent about how in the UK, Dungeons and Dragons probably doesn't have, or at least for more recent generations, hasn't had the kind of visibility that it might do in the US. And so most people, and myself included, are typically introduced to tabletop games through Warhammer, because Games Workshop has such a huge, almost monopoly on hobby stores here in the UK. But that's where I started. But when I had an uncle who took me to a Warhammer convention at the Excel Centre in London. It was a very visceral experience for a young man. And I remember going through like this. They had these like big, almost like bins of like tattered old books. And I remember they were just filled with old like TSR, Cambridge printed manuals, which I imagine today are probably worth thousands. But they, were giving them away for essentially free. And for, I think, less than a few pounds, I picked up the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, like player's guides, and I think even the Manual of Planes. So that is where it first began. I tried to get people to play D&D with me for maybe 10 years, and nobody was really very interested. And then 5th edition came out, and that's when I really started to play D&D regularly. That was the big change, I think. I gained major popularity here, and even my friends who were totally disinterested in D&D became quite interested at that point. So
yeah,
it's actually kind of surprising to me, because in the UK you actually have like castles, like genuine castles, and everyone is already doing the voices that American DMs are struggling to make.
Maybe
Andrew, they're not doing a voice. They're not doing a voice.
It's too close to reality,
Yeah,
people are living D&D every day, so
yeah, I guess so.
It's not fantasy.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Maybe here in the US we just lack that any sort of connection with a classic fantasy. Maybe that's part of it.
Maybe.
That's awesome. Did you play Warhammer as well? I promise I will not sidetrack us into a Warhammer conversation, but I will dip my toes in it.
Yeah, so I think when I was about 10 years old, I transferred primary schools, right? Elementary schools, if you were. And I was like, obviously the new kid, and I didn't really have any friends. So I decided to like look through all the clubs that the school offered, and bizarrely enough, the club ran a Warhammer club, and it was at that Warhammer club where I met all my like quote unquote nerdy friends, right? And I kind of played Warhammer from the ages of like 10 until up to maybe 14, 15 years old, and then I stopped playing for forever. I haven't really even picked it up since, other than the video games, but I did really enjoy playing it when I was younger. So
nice. Yeah, I got into it somewhat recently. I can't imagine an after school club. That's an 8-hour session after school.
I know. We would
so long.
we would leave the pieces on the tables and then like move the tables and put them in like these
That's
big
awesome.
storage lockers, and then bring the tables out like next week, because we only had Warhammer Club once a week.
Oh wow.
Man, that's like the specific kind of commitment that teenagers do have. You know what I mean? I remember that being like, I almost said like, oh yeah, that's like the iron grip of teenage commitment. But I was like not committed to anything when I was a teenager except for stuff like that. You know, like whatever thing it was just took over my brain. Yeah.
With the commitment of building the models and painting the models and then learning the game and starting it, it's like we are finishing this battle.
Yeah.
We are to the end.
Yes.
Yeah. So you already had the conditioning, you know, to all that it takes for D&D. You're already ahead of the game. And so you also run a Spelljammer game though. Will you tell us about that, about the game you're running right now, and if you're running any other games as well?
Yes. So I'm not sure if everyone knows this about me, but I actually run games of D&D for a living. That's what I do. So I run at least 4 hours of D&D every single day of the week.
Wow, let's go.
Some days I run 2 sessions a day. 3 days a week I run 2 sessions a day. So I play a lot of D&D, but the only one I put out there is the beloved Spelljammer Tears of the Moon, which is our attempt to kind of imagine what Dungeons and Dragons kind of looks like when transitioned from the end date of where kind of Spelljammer left off in 1372 DR, I believe, in the Forgotten Realms, and then brought forward to 1490, the current 5e Spelljammer start date. That's probably the best way of summarizing what Spelljammer Tears of the Moon is. Fortuitously, we now have an official supplement coming out for Spelljammer, so who knows how that's going to change the outlook of Tears of the Moon.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Yeah. So we're doing a similar thing because we're farther forward in the future. But I think that's it's so fun that we both kind of like without, you know, like on our own individual tracks, we're like, well, this was like how I would run it, you know, because it makes sense to be like, okay, like so much has happened in both meta wise and like, you know, in game wise of since the Spelljammer stuff was put out, and so much stuff was like reorganized, where I was like, okay, how do I both like not ignore this and also not have to be beholden to stuff that doesn't quite fit, and we did the same thing. So that's just like fun and cool. So
I like to think that characters like Flute and Moonboy have ancestors that exist in the Spelljammer Tears of the Moon universe, right? Because it's set hundreds of years prior, so there has to be a progenitor in there somewhere.
Yeah, there's got to be. Yeah.
I had worked a little bit of Flute's lineage out, but not that far back.
No. We should work out some Easter eggs. Let's do it.
If I may, that's awesome that you are able to make a living running games professionally. I've always wondered about that. So is your client base, what does that look like? Is it what is your average client base for running games for them?
So the way I describe it is grown-up nerds. So, you know, the types of people who played D&D when they were teenagers and now have become, you know, fully fledged adults in their own rights who have expendable income, but maybe not necessarily the time or the connections to head to a hobby store, or they're looking for a high value product, right? They don't want to play in a kind of pickup game. They want to secure the security of someone who is like compelled by the finances to provide a top quality product. So yeah, definitely older audience than
yeah, I mean, that's it's a good way to keep your game going. You know, if you're a player out there, we say our little sign off on the show, as you might know, is tip your DMs. And, you know, because it's just like a lot of work to keep everything together and to, you know, to schedule things and you know, maintain life. So I like how that's like the grown up version of tip your DMs. It's just pay your DMs.
Just straight up pay them. Yeah, the energies are so different from playing and running a game. Like when I play Better Than Heroes, I just literally walk to my desk. All I need is one sheet of paper, and I just sit down. I'm just relaxed. I'm just so excited to have fun, and I know Harlan has so many so many things going on. It's like the energies are very different. So you said that you run a game every day, and sometimes even two. Is every game its own campaign, or are some of these more like one shots or like mini series, things like that?
So not just for the sake of continuity, but also for the sake of almost financial stability, almost all of my sessions are continuous campaigns. And in some of these campaigns, I've been playing with people for 4 years now, right? They've been playing in the games, paying for the games. It's difficult because it's an industry where it's very hard to keep kind of business and pleasure separate, right?
Sure.
A lot of the people I've been playing with now, like, sure, they pay me to run the games for them, but I truly do consider them some of my, my best friends, and it's hard to kind of sometimes juggle those two things. But yes, so predominantly I run campaigns. A fair few of them are like pre-written adventures. So I've ran through the entire 5th edition adventure catalog.
Oh, nice.
You can think of a campaign. Wow. I've run it at least once, if not a few times.
Wow.
So yeah, that's more or less the model. I have shifted into running some Pathfinder 2nd edition games recently, purely because I've been running 5e for 5 years, and I just wanted to test something out that was a little bit different. And that has been going really well too.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, that was my next question, to see if you mixed it up with any other games. Is it just D&D and Pathfinder?
So Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, not just for popularity's sake, but also just for this, at least professionally paid market, is the lifeblood of what people like me do, because it's got the main user base of people willing to pay. It's much harder to recruit for a system like Pathfinder 2nd edition. But in my server, it's not just myself. We have a couple of other DMs who run games for money, and we've had success running all manner of systems. We've had people run Starfinder games, had people run Monster of the Week, Star Wars 5e, amongst others. What about Delta Green, Blades in the Dark, all kinds of fun, niche, varied tabletops. So
nice.
That's awesome.
That is pretty cool. Do you have any homebrew stuff that you do with any of these games, or is it all pretty much published adventures?
No, I do run a few homebrew campaigns. So at one point I was running the precursor to Spelljammer Tears of the Moon as a paid session. But one of my bigger projects that maybe one day will see the light of some screen time is a campaign setting that of my own design, that is designed around like the more like mythological elements of our own world. So far, those campaigns have particularly centered around East Asian kind of folklore and legend, but I have plans to expand that world out to European, South American, all manner of separate representations, because as kind of categorized in the newest Wizards of the Coast book, I think we need a less Eurocentric, fantasy, what would you like, smorgasbord for people to enjoy. There it is. It's a brilliant book.
I just started reading it. It's so good already. It's just so fun. Like you can feel, as someone who's like, I've read all of the adventures too. You can feel how much I don't know. It's way more exciting to me to read about here's this one city that has this history, and you can put this anywhere, because as a DM I'm like, cool, that's extremely useful, So that's awesome. Yeah. Shout out thanks so much. We had 3 or 4 different people sub. I think this is the first hype train we've ever had on the dungeon. So thank you all for doing that. Have you ever run Morkborg? That was a question in chat.
No, I've never.
No, it looks so fun. Yeah.
It does. I definitely want to read more into it.
And also, the question was asked: is is John your favorite character?
No, John's
No.
the worst character on the stream.
Okay, cool. Noted. Here we're getting the truth here on the dungeon. You know.
Every
No, he knows
stream has one, and I'm right there with you.
Right, that's it. Don't talk about Aaron like that.
And so also you've been very involved in the just announced that we're involved in as well the Spelljammer Con, the JammerCon.
Yes.
And do you want to tell folks, in case they don't know about it, just like a little bit about what it is and how it's going, what it's going to be?
So on the 20th of August, so less than 3 weeks, I believe, from now, we will be running a Games Day and corresponding all-star Spelljammer stream schedule for people to enjoy. So the con is free. It's digital, so you can join in from wherever you are in the world and sit down at tables and play Spelljammer in various systems. We have people who've already signed up to run Spelljammer in 2E, Spelljammer in Grayspace, Spelljammer in 5th edition. We have one of our own from Tears of the Moon. James is going to be running a session in Monsters of the Week, which I think is going to be really
that's cool.
Interesting and cool. Yeah. So there's all manner of games being set up. It's a small con. We're a small organizational team, so we're just trying to make sure that the con is good rather than push it too far and disappoint people. But we have as you mentioned, we have a whole cast of awesome streamers, including yourselves. Obviously, Better Than Heroes will be in some form making an appearance with us at JammerCon. My stream, Spelljammer Tears of the Moon. I'm sure you're all familiar with prior dungeon guests, Jason Surrency, aka God Mode, as well as another alum of the dungeon, Old Dragon, will be making an appearance. Another alum of the dungeon, Nick Urasaver of the Tales of the Voidfarer podcast. Any nominated, we have to mention. So there's a whole cast of people, but most importantly, there's a very special guest panel that I have an announcement exclusively to make here on the dungeon.
We're announcing here on the dungeon, which also,
right.
When you told me what it was beforehand, I freaked out. I was like, "Oh my God, are you serious?" This is a very good. I'm so grateful that you're announcing it here. So, please share.
Yeah. So I will say we're making it on the dungeon because I'm honored to be here, but also because we only got confirmation that this is going to be happening today. But during the JammerCon live stream, I and God Mode Jason, as we know, will be hosting a interview not too dissimilar to the dungeon here, and we will be interviewing none other than the father of Spelljammer himself, Jeff Grubb.
Yeah, so cool. That's incredible.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, just truly some of a favorite of all, like my favorite old manuals were all written by him. And so that's so cool that he's coming and hanging out, and then you all were able to do that. So I'll be there. I'll be watching. I'll be in the chat asking questions if there is one. So
we will be asking
cool.
questions from the chat. So please do come if you can.
How does gravity work?
I promise I won't.
How do we have enough air?
Yeah. every question I had.
Just is moving your ship 90 degrees count as move? Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, chat, I'm very excited about it. It's gonna be super fun. It's just cool. I like you list off the people, alums. It's been so cool to talk to so many people that have had the same kind of like affinity for a certain flavor of D&D, and it's been so fun to hear about how people have done it differently and like the difference, but similar reasons. Like where we've been drawn to it, and so I just think it's super cool. I've gotten to peek into some of the how much work people are putting into it to just make sure it's good. So thank you to you all, because I'm a big fan, and so I get to just like be a player in it almost rather than be the DM of the con. So yeah, it's going to be really cool. Check it out as well. There's socials specifically for it now, right? Maybe.
Yes.
So we'll tweet about it. Come find it on ours or the Bipolar Dicerollers Twitter as well.
Mm-hmm.
And tell everybody the date one more time too.
It will be starting on, I believe, the stream schedule is scheduled to start at 8 a.m. Eastern, so 5 a.m. Pacific, on the 20th of August of the upcoming month. Not next year, this year.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Please do come. And I should mention there are going to be some giveaways as well, including digital codes for the upcoming Spelljammer box set, as well as hopefully some JammerCon merch. Jason, I'm sure as you know, Godmode is a fantastic graphic designer and has made some really cool assets for the con. So
everything I've seen by him is I'm like, oh my god, like awesome. I've always loved like the style he has for his stream, but just to see him whip out so much cool stuff like so quickly that's very cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So no, go for it.
Oh, go ahead.
Well,
okay. No,
you, Andrew, it's you.
We're getting our dungeon boots back on. We're gonna sync up. I was just gonna say, if you're in chat and you have any questions, shoot them at us. I did have a question for you with your Spelljammer games, and forgive my ignorance of your stream, but do you have a system for like ship to ship combat or like ship chases? And I was just curious, like if you had created your system or adopted another system.
So the system that the foundations of Spelljammer Tears of the Moon was built on was essentially trying to like convert all of the rules from AD&D over to 5th edition, which I did personally, and I found a kind of core framework that I found to be sufficient, maybe a little bit bare bones, because it's a stream game as well. A lot of it is kind of more presentable for the sake of being on a storytelling stream. But then I kind of dug a little bit deeper, and I do want to give credit to some of the people who inspired me to go further on some of those concepts. Particularly, I'm not sure if you've encountered them, but Cessadrix, as they're known on Discord and Reddit, created a supplement called Wildjammer, which quite a lot of people use, especially those who use the Foundry virtual tabletop. It's a fantastic collection of ship mechanics and stat blocks for ships and all sorts that truly was like a personal passion project for them. It was itself, they are very clear about this, inspired by the system Dark Matter. Are you familiar with Dark Matter? It's another more science fiction bent space fantasy type system. Maybe a little bit like Starfinder from Paizo. So that's the core framework for our rules system for Tears of the Moon.
That's awesome. Yeah, because it's a whole different game when you're not having person to person fighting, and I'm a big believer in kind of like doing like a similar thing, like because it's for a stream and we're not it's a little bit difficult to translate like the fun of sitting around a table and like mapping out like, okay, we're going to do this like joint maneuver together to do these things, especially when you're remote. But yeah, my big thing is there's you can bring, especially with Spelljammer, especially with like kind of the rules about them being able to go into what we call terminal speed, like the spell jamming speed. You have to be at an X amount of distance from anything else with gravity. That just running the game where it's like, okay, if you are encountering someone who is outside of that space, but you can still see them, you're either going to be trying to catch them or they're trying to catch you. And outside of that, you just enter a point where it's like, okay, now our ships are right next to each other. So now we're in the grid, because it's just like basically fighting on two islands then that have guns on them. But yeah, it's a whole other game, like, a ship versus ship role playing game. But
yeah, I think.
and you
I
mentioned
think we saw some pretty. No, you go on.
You mentioned Star Wars 5e too, like running that. I've found since I've been running this game so many just like little things from that have been. I haven't adopted the whole system, but there's so many things inside of there that I've just found useful as in a similar way that you've talked about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, do you know about this? Do you know about Star Wars 5e?
I don't. I know about the Star Wars tabletop games. I have not heard Star Wars 5e. Is that a mashup of 5e and Star Wars?
Yeah, it's like an open source rule set for if you wanted to use like primarily D&D mechanics for a Star Wars type game. This is how it's just like an open rule set.
Nice.
It's very good. Yeah.
That sounds very cool. That's all I need to do is get sucked into a Star Wars black hole next to all my other black holes. We do have some good questions in chat. We had one earlier. They asked if you have a blog by chance, Rob, since you have played all of these modules.
Right. I would love to sit down and kind of write my thoughts down, but I think I say that I run games of D&D every day, but also that comes with prepping for those games as well. So I do like wake up in the morning and eat, breathe, sleep Dungeons and Dragons and various other tabletop systems. Maybe in the future, I do have a Patreon where I post from time to time. I develop like character content, as well as I commission artists to produce fantastic assets for Spelljammer.
Yeah, your large Luigi
NPCs
is so good.
Yeah. That large Luigi was our crowning achievement thus far. It got quite the love on places like Reddit, and then somebody even went out and produced a 3D model for large Luigi that is now being 3D printed quite widespread. So
whoa, that's awesome.
We're quite proud of that. It's really good. So yeah, if you like that kind of thing, obviously you guys have a great kind of repository of artwork from Jordan, but if you want a different style, we offered like a style of art that's more in the vein of what 5th edition currently tries to capture, that almost like poppy realism, I guess you could describe it as. So,
your map of Brawl's incredible too. I got to peek at that. So if you run a Spelljammer game, I highly recommend. It's very good. Nick Eurosiva is in the chat, and can I read their question real quick, because it's a question. It's such a trolly I'm a Spelljammer DM question, but it's very funny. If a nautiloid is leaving realm space at 5,431,394 miles per hour, and a hammer ship is leaving Kryn space at 4,599 and more nines miles per hour, how long does it take them to enter tactical speed upon their meeting somewhere in the Phlogiston? That's just like a joke. The audience is here. They're on this. The only people to laugh at that are people who have been on the dungeons.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And if I was doing my best Brennan Lee Mulligan impression, I'd be like,
actually, spelljamming speed is limited to 2 million miles per hour
or something ridiculous like that.
Oh my gosh, the video of Matt Mercer getting asked those, like, to find all the rules differences here, where he finds more than is actually on there, is one of the most incredible pieces of media I've ever seen. Yeah.
Brilliant. For sure.
We have one more question, then we'll get to the roll table, because our time has blazed by at about 5 million miles an hour.
It is spelljamming speed.
Yeah. How would someone ask, how would you all change 5e to be more balanced and challenging?
Oh, God. I don't know who planted that question, but I feel like they've targeted me. I'm a huge proponent of 5th edition. I love 5e. It's my favorite tabletop system overall, but I definitely do find at least the core content is geared towards there's nothing wrong with this. This is all, I think, subjective and very much about people's tastes. Very much geared towards feeling powerful, feeling like the hero, crushing mooks and not being at too much risk of very much reprisal. Now, I know that other certain GMs take it upon themselves to tailor that experience. But at least by core, if you play through the adventure modules and you follow the rules outlaid in the player's guides and such, you typically end up, if you make a fairly well streamlined character with a character that is probably a little bit more powerful than it should be.
Right. So anyone but Flute. Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
Right. Click. Just a super powerful character. So you would. What I would do is I would try and this is super nerdy, but I would try and maybe crunch the numbers a little harder and figure out the permutations in regards to conditions and effects and how those actually affect like underlying probabilities of like the statistical happenstances that could occur, right? So we say as a rule, like advantage is essentially a 3.5 boost to your overall roll, right? Like that's a statistical analysis of that feature. I would go even deeper and be like, what does frighten typically do? What does poison typically do? And then you would scale everything forward. You're like, okay, well, being able to do this to a group of enemies is equal to making 2 attacks per round or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like CR is one of the most leading things about it because like it doesn't teach new dungeon masters how to build hard encounters. You know what I mean? Because there are so many monsters in the monster manual that they do have an element about them that is very dangerous. But if they can't do that, then or they only get like one shot at it or things like that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that the monsters know what they're doing is like one of the best. Like if I was going to recommend a book besides, like the core books, like I would be like, buy this one too, because it really talks through like, okay, here's how it's not just like optimizing. It's like, this is the attitude and this is how you run this. But the thing I tell everyone, I tell every dungeon master, if you think you're, like the adventure isn't hard enough or whatever, it's just make sure your players can't go into the boss fight with full spell slots and full hit points, because in 5e 100% they all like if they just verse anything in there, especially higher level, like they're gonna win, just math wise. But if they can't go in full health and hit points, that's the fun of the game a little bit, is like rationing those. That's why cantrips matter. So
right.
That's my answer to that question.
That's fair. That's true. I mean, in the DMG, it says that you should budget for 4 to 8 encounters per day, but nobody
again, not
does
right.
that.
Yeah.
No one wants to do 4 to 8 like kind of
Yeah.
throwaway encounters. So,
But I mean, if you did that for your players once, you'd have them on their toes for the rest of the campaign. They're like, remember that time when we had 8 encounters in a day?
Mhm.
They'd never coast ever again.
For sure.
Well, as you know, Rob, we have a roll table. If you want to roll a d20, we have a list of questions here. This is kind of how we close out every episode.
This is my the DM is always right D20. Pointed. Okay, so that is a 9 on the D20.
A 9. This is what we had last episode too.
Oh, all right, let's do it.
But I do want to ask Rob, because Rob is a professional game master and dungeon master, so I definitely would like his thoughts on this. If you had to pick one trait that makes a great dungeon master, what would it be?
Flexibility. I think being able to adjust to your group is the biggest strength of a dungeon master. There's no worse feeling than getting into a game and having a DM who is kind of clandestine with things, or refuses to adapt to the strengths of the people at the table, because a game is only as good as the players.
Yeah, that's such a good answer, because that's the myth of the DM, right? Is that they're, the players need to figure out what they're trying to do, or like that they have it all planned out, and that, or like, yeah, it's just, for me all the time, I'm just trying to listen to the players and take what things are true and make it a part of the game. So Yeah.
Sure.
Definitely.
a
That
good
is
answer.
a great one. All right. Well,
All right.
that was a great episode. Thank you so much. Rob, is there anything you want to plug? We'll be hyping JammerCon for sure. That sounds awesome. And I think we'll be participating in whatever way we can. But yeah, anything else you'd like to plug?
I think, yeah, if you're interested in playing some Spelljammer games throughout whatever edition, you're looking to kind of meet some like-minded people who are also looking to run and play in games, our Discord server that we have set up is a fantastic place to do so. Outside of that, after you're done watching Better Than Heroes and you're still thirsting for more Spelljammer content, please come and watch Spelljammer Tears of the Moon. And I'm going to plug, go watch Jordan Razorloo stream. He just beat Melania today. Props to you, Jordan.
Ooh, wow.
Nice.
A shout out to Razor Lou.
To the Moon Boy.
Nice.
Yeah. Very fun. Yeah. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. Yeah, we'll see you at JammerCon. And yeah, if you are checking us out for the first time and you are also a fan of Spelljammer content, we run a Spelljammer game every Monday here on this channel. You can check us out at betterthanheroes.com. We'll get you anywhere you need to go, however you want to listen to it. It's we have Arc 1 up as a podcast now. We'll be adding more of our arcs up there as well. But that's it. That's everything. Sam, thanks so much for hanging out with us, Rob, and for all the work you're doing over at JammerCon. And yeah, Andrew, anything else? Oh, I know. One more thing. Tip your DMs, everybody.
I was going to hype.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was also going to hype my game. But yes, also tip your DM. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right, later. Bye.